Welcome to the Haunted Hacker version May version 3.0, I think. A little bit of news. Next week is the TechStrong Live event. I'll be speaking in Boston and doing the Android hacking workshop, teach people how to hack some droids and write some malware. Other than that, not a whole lot of news. I'm just really excited to get this out and been doing some work with Tony Sales and some other people doing a really cool pen test that it should be public probably down the road. But it's really cool. I think you'll like it. So without further ado, I have Ian Poynter on with me, and he has a fabulous background, really interesting. And Ian, why don't you go ahead and take over and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've done?
I never know whether to do these things backwards or forwards, but I think I'll do forwards, but I'll do it quickly because I actually started in the security industry in the early 90s. So I've been doing this for a while. Before that, I was working at a software development company, started my own company thinking I was going to help people to get on the internet. And what actually happened was I knew more about security than they did already, and everybody wanted that. So that's what I did. And for about 10 years, I did consulting in security. I actually used to install the infamous Trusted Information Systems firewall. I was one of their subcontractors, so we can go there if you want to. So I did that for a while. After that, I swung to the dark side and worked for a security vendor. So I was a very early employee at a company called Bit9 that became, Bit9 Carbon Black got bought by VMware. I had left by the time they went public, but I was there for many years doing a whole bunch of things. Some of that code I'm responsible for, although they've probably purged it by now. And I started what I called sustaining engineering, which was basically a bridge between our software support team and our engineers to keep them out of each other's hair. Ran all the patches, did a bunch of stuff. Then I went back to the other dark side and ran security at a genomics institute for a while, which was entertaining. Then I swung over back to a little bit of consulting and worked at a startup for a while as a CISO, which was interesting, in biotech space, which is where I spend some of my other time, apparently. Then I took a year off and went traveling, and now I'm back consulting again, and I call myself a vCISO, or you could call it vCISO, or however you pronounce that. I had someone say CISO today on a call, and I just sort of bit my lip. But anyway, it's one of those things like GIF and GIF that's never going to be resolved. And so now I work with mostly smaller startup companies as a part-time CISO, basically setting strategy, helping them do whatever they need to in biotech, sometimes in software development, whatever takes my fancy. I'm back to being small again, and that lets you choose your customers. And I like to form a close relationship with customers and really understand what they're trying to do, because you really can't be a CISO without understanding the business underneath it, which is sort of the evil underbelly of those of us that come from the tech side.
Sure. Cool.
That was probably the slightly more than 2 cents and less than 10 cents.
Nice. So it's funny you mentioned Carbon Black. The company that I work for actually uses Carbon Black as an MSP. We have a lot of clients and we run Carbon Black. Carbon Black works really, really well when it comes to ransomware events with, all the different types of, segmentation and stuff. Really good stuff.
It was truly revolutionary when the founders of Bit9 patented some of the technology. I'd never seen anything like it. It's one of the reasons I went to work for them. And, one of our early marketing people had to spend a lot of time and energy and money persuading Gartner to make a magic quadrant for whitelisting, because they kept thinking we were antivirus. And so, we sort of created that segment. There wasn't anyone else doing that in the early days, and it was a ton of fun.
Yeah, it's awesome technology even now. I mean, with ransomware, the microsegmentation is phenomenal when it comes to knocking down ransomware. Like if
Yeah.
I didn't have Carbon
Yeah.
Black, some of the incidents I've done would probably take me days, but I can get it done in like
Hmm.
24 hours.
Yeah. There's a
So
lot
yeah,
of fun stuff there.
yeah,
The
and the
technology's definitely improved.
oh for sure, for sure. And I've seen stuff like Dark Trace and some other stuff, and I've worked
Mm.
with some people talking about Dark Trace and how they can improve the product. I've got a few friends that work there. But I think where we're at as an industry, as far as machine learning AI, we're still a ways off from having true AI. Right now, I think
Mm.
it's really at best guess, it's probably just a little bit of machine learning and a very weak foundation of Bayes algorithm. Um, but I think over
Mhm.
time they'll probably find another algorithm to use other than Bayes, because Bayes really doesn't work really well with small subsets. You need large subsets of data.
Yeah.
So
Had a lot of conversations, and I'm prepared to have more about poisoning machine learning
oh, it's
as a
easy.
tactic. It's very easy. And, there's a lot of ML out there, and in the security space, I mean, it's like if someone poisons your translation algorithm, then you end up with a Monty Python sketch. The one where he's trying to say, please show me the way to the station. And he reads it out of the phrase book and says, please fondle my buttocks. And it's like, okay, if that happens, it'll be embarrassing, but it's not the end of the earth. But if you're trusting your universe to machine learning, and what you're trusting is, I don't know, driving a car or
Right.
stopping attacks on a network, you got a different set of problems.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And when you look at like machine learning and the way that most people deploy those solutions, they don't even check their network and do a baseline, right? They don't even make sure that
Mhm.
their network is secure and nobody's in their network. So they dump in this machine learning. It goes, oh, hey, all this corruption, all this fraud, hey, it's normal. We're good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, be careful what you train it,
Yeah.
because it might think that's normal. I mean, that's true for a dog, I guess, as well. But it's like, I think ML is another. I mean, after 30 years in this business, we've had obsessions, I used to call it the Wall Street Journal School of Management. Why don't we have a VPN? The journal says everyone has a VPN. So take out VPN and insert machine learning or insert whatever. Well, why don't we have whatever the latest thing is? Because everyone else has one, and then all the vendors get a big, dog pile on the companies. Well, the CEO says we need this, and so, well, we've got that. It's I don't know.
Yeah, everybody tries to keep up with the latest technology, but the problem is that, I mean, when you look at where we started as an industry, and I talk about this all the time, and I feel like a broken record, but when you look at where we started as an industry with defense platforms, and then you look at what we have now, yes, there's been some changes, and there's been some small advances here and there, but really, it's the same pig with just different lipstick.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like to compare. Oh, sorry, Kim, I cut you off.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and also when it comes down to it, most of the things that are the causes for the breaches are the same basic thing. It's never, it's just, yeah, it's just sad.
People don't patch. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's not changed in 30 years. Which is, I mean, I look at our industry and how far we've come, and I'm kind of impressed, because if I compare to, say, structural engineering and architecture that have had hundreds and thousands of years, and the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, to convince everyone that maybe, harmonics and resonance or all these other things, or how to build buildings that resist earthquakes or floods. And we've learned that through painful, very painful, and events often involving death, or at least flinging of cars off bridges, which is really cool, as long as there's no one in it. And but we've had not very long. I mean, how long have we had computational engines? And I'm sure it's like I could just see, Ada Lovelace's evil stepsister sitting there thinking, oh, how can I malware this? This is, we haven't had very long to really work it out. And it's the old saw that all it takes is one bad guy to break in, but to defend, you're defending against hundreds of people who are all using the fact that you haven't patched anything in 3 years.
Right.
But still, even if we, even in organizations that patch like maniacs, you still are going to get break-ins because things are shifting and changing.
Oh, for sure.
And,
I mean, when you look at 9/11, talk about structural engineering and protecting buildings and what they can withstand, and then you take one group of people who completely defeated the whole process in one day. That attack proved.
And that was because they were doing, and it sounds terrible to talk about it in that way, but they were thinking outside the box, because they said, well, what could we do that no one could possibly have planned for, and that no one in their right mind would have built for, and then they did it.
Yep.
And and it was horrible and blah blah. But this specific, why did it happen? It's because no one ever thought of that.
Yeah.
And and take that on a micro scale with all these things that are, with technology moving so fast, and I don't know, switching to APIs has made things interesting. Everybody wants an API. In fact, I usually tell people, well, don't buy that if it doesn't have a decent API, because you never know when you're going to need to extend it or pull data from it or whatever. But it probably has an insecure API, and you probably want to turn it off until you really need it. Yeah. And it's well, why bother? Why bother writing poison on the bottle until Granny drinks it?
Right. Yeah, it's funny. You talked about how nobody had done that attack before. What was funny about wasn't really funny, but what was interesting about 9/11 was Tom Clancy actually wrote a novel about someone flying a plane into the Capitol. And so after 9/11, they actually pulled Tom Clancy and was like, talk to us about what you know, because he basically almost predicted it. But the thing is that people don't listen. So you have the engineers, you have the developers,
right? And
you tell them, hey, this is possible. This is going to happen. They don't listen to you. They code the APIs. They code whatever they need, and it happens.
Well, that's where I'm constantly saying, like, people are, it's a human, I'm assuming it's a human nature. Until it happens to me, it doesn't matter. Like, doesn't matter that we've written about it, we've talked about it, we've like beaten our head against the wall. Like, well, it doesn't matter till it happened to me. So,
well, don't get me started on public health.
I
have friends who work in public health, and very often you're just sort of reduced to, oh, I work in cybersecurity and I feel your pain.
Yeah.
It's because it's human nature, like Kim was saying. It's exactly right. It's like people, the way we think as people doesn't change, and the way we analyze things. I remember I had to take statistics classes. I do actually have a computer science degree, which it used to be really unusual in cybersecurity and made me happy, because diversity of thought is exactly what we need. And diversity in general is exactly what we need, which is something that, Kim and I will rant on about for ages if you give us a drink. But it's true. And I happen to have a computer science degree, and they made us take statistics. And it was kind of a bitch, actually. It was one of those classes everybody was like, oh, and it was mandatory, because at UCL, which is where I went, computer science came out of the statistics department, not out of the math department, which actually made for a different program, especially in the early days, because statisticians are very different from mathematicians. But what I realized after the fact, and what I realized when it was going on, is that everything we know about statistics, nobody actually really believes it that hasn't studied it. And so when you start giving people probabilities, it doesn't make any sense to them. So if you say you have a 1 in 100 probability of, I don't know, catching some virus, that means nothing to people. and you say, well, you have a 1 in 2 probability of catching it, it still means nothing, even though that's like, you could say hi to 2 people and your likelihood of getting it is not 100%, but it's pretty damn high.
Until they get it.
And well, get it and know they have it, but that's a different thing. And it's, it's fascinating. I have seen a couple of times where people, you can model network traffic with exponential distributions, and you can, some of the modeling techniques they use in statistics are really interesting when it comes to modeling behavior of threats or behavior of machine learning systems in the face of threats or any number of other things. But there aren't enough people who know how to do it. And I wouldn't say I'm even one of them either. So it's fascinating to me. It's we repeatedly relearn things and then forget them.
Yeah, the percentage, the chance of getting COVID, for example, I'm sure is probably like 1 in 50. However, I've had it 6 times, so that 1 in 50 kind of goes out the window. And another thing I wanted to point out too, I just got over COVID last week. I was quarantined for the multiple time. But the problem was the government tests that you get for free, that you get 4 per household whenever you want them for free.
Right.
I took 2 of them. Both of them were negative. But I had COVID.
Thanks for telling me that, because I forgot that I was allowed those and just ordered them. But it's like, I've had shots, and I'm not going to go there into
Me too.
whatever that.
Yeah.
And it's
I'm pretty sure now. Oh, sorry. I
No,
apologize.
please.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure now I've had COVID because 3 people in 3 different states, after I've described what I went through, they're like, you had COVID. I tested positive, but I used that at home test. And everybody has told me that it doesn't catch probably the variant I had or whatever. And I was like, well, that would make sense.
Well, they created the test when the first strain came out, and they based it on COVID-19, not Omicron and its subvariants, but the original strain. And so all of those tests that people are ordering are shite. They just need to throw them in the trash. Like they're worth nothing.
I mean, it's somewhat better than nothing because it makes people think.
It makes you feel secure.
I had, well, we can talk about that too. But I mean, I had 3 shots, and I was thinking whether I should get another booster, and decided to put it off because I know a lot of people in biotech. I talk to people. I can talk a little bit of enough of their language to be dangerous, and enough to read the papers and whatever else. And I'm like, for a long set of circumstances, I happened to take a COVID test and was positive and had no idea. I'm completely asymptomatic. It was sort of like maybe I had a little bit of an allergy that I get anyway because I'm allergic to a little bit of tree pollen. So I sniffle a little bit and cough a little bit. Who knows who I gave it to? I had no idea I had it. By the time I, worked out like maybe this is where I got it, it was gone already. Yeah. So I'm assuming as well, like him, that I've had it multiple times. My father was 89 when he got COVID and was asymptomatic. And we know it was real because he had a PCR test done. And my mother had an upset stomach. So I guess I'm, good with the genetic. But I think at this point, some of that sort of like, if we're going down the COVID rat hole, I'm just waiting to see when there is an enormous mess in China because they've dug themselves into this hole deeper and deeper. Because just like you can't have 0 intrusions or 0 malware, you can't have 0 COVID.
Right.
You can say you have it. And I mean, if you've got the ability to lock down 20 million people, I guess you can sort of have it.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be tenable in the long term. So
No.
I'm just sort of waiting for it to happen.
It was really funny too that I was watching Live Leak when I lived in London when the pandemic broke out, and one of the videos from Live Leak had the military and the police forces in China going into apartment buildings and literally taking steel bars and drilling them into the walls so people could not get out of their apartment. I thought, well, that's one way to do lockdown. Yeah.
Wow.
Literal lockdown. You lock it down. I mean, at this point, nowhere in the EU or the UK will test you as you come in. You have to be vaccinated. Canada doesn't test you when you come in, but the US, here's something that people don't know. You have to test to come in on a plane, but you can walk across the border without a test, and you can
Yes.
come in on a boat without a test.
Yes.
So if you have COVID and you need to get here, and you're either an alien who's vaccinated or a US citizen, you just fly to Canada or get on a boat and walk in. And it's like, so why are we still requiring all these people to get tests and all the airlines to fudge? It's security theater again.
Exactly. It's like the any rule on the firewall.
The any rule. I mean, it wasn't it Bruce Schneier who started with the security theater thread years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing him talk about it years and too many years ago to say, because I want to pretend like I'm in my 30s. And
Me too.
yeah, so we're in our 30s.
Exactly.
Or as I used to say to a friend of mine, 3011, 3012, 30.
Nice.
And it's like, this will never cease.
No.
So it's the shoes off. Britain gave up on taking the shoes off years ago, but yet we're still doing it here. Maybe because pre-check is a revenue source. I don't know.
It is.
I mean, I'm lucky. I have a credit card that pays for it, so I don't care. But no, I mean, there are security theater is one of the worst things, and COVID theater is just as bad.
Just as bad.
Public health theater, and it puts you in a position where when people should have been or should be wearing masks, they don't, because they've come to perceive that some mask wearing is performative and theatrical. And so when you really need them to wear a mask, they don't. And security is really the same thing. It's like if we keep crying wolf, and we keep going on and on about, especially vendors, oh my God, this, oh my God, that. It's like, this is not helping. This is not helping people to get used to it.
So I have to tell you that a couple of things happened at the FutureCon event that I went to, and Chris Roberts spoke there. He was the keynote, and one real quick thing, talking about poisoning, one of the vendors did point out they were able to poison by changing 6 pixels in a picture. 6 pixels, that easy. Anyway, but Chris went on and did his wonderful rant about vendors, and the poor guy that went on after him doing his vendor speech was like, yeah, it was pretty brutal. That's all I'm going to say. But it was awesome and great and wonderful, as Chris Roberts usually.
So not only do we have COVID to deal with, but we also have the new ransomware called monkeypox.
Oh.
Yeah, monkeypox.
Yeah, it just came through. It came through from London, and there's a guy in the US, actually in Boston, where I'm going to this next week, that has monkeypox. And I'm like,
yes, he does.
What the hell? Before it was Ebola. There was a guy in Houston when I lived there that came from Africa for treatment and had Ebola. And I'm like, stay away
here.
Yeah.
I lived for many years in Boston, and it feels like my hometown in a lot of ways. I don't live there anymore, but many things I could say about Boston. I don't imagine that you'll get monkeypox.
No.
So it's kind of an interesting disease, but I'm not going to go there. This is my woo.
I think the average death rate for monkeypox is like every 1 in 10 in Africa that catch monkeypox die from it. But I mean, we've come a long way. We have, a lot more medical facilities and technology to help us rather than Nigeria or Congo.
Right. Well, and you look at COVID and how quickly the mRNA vaccines emerged. What's interesting is that Moderna were working on mRNA technology for HIV vaccines, and they put that on hold for COVID. But this makes me feel like we might actually get an HIV vaccine out of this as well, which wouldn't suck.
Isn't it amazing how quick they took after COVID to knock COVID down? However, in the 80s, when they should have been doing the same thing for HIV, they didn't.
Yeah. Oh, I wonder why. We better not go down that rat hole.
Selective Darwinism. That's what I call it. And it's the government-funded selective Darwinism. So, yeah, it's
you
bad.
you can bet that if it had affected only 80-year-old white men, there would have been a vaccine in 3 weeks.
For sure.
Or at least an effort to have one. But because it was a population that the government didn't want to talk about. I mean, Reagan didn't even mention AIDS for a number of years. I forget how many it was, but it was kind of, looking back on it, was just horrifying, and actually living through it was pretty horrifying too. But
yeah, it's crazy. And I was talking to my mom. My mom works in the medical field, or worked in the medical field before she retired, and it was really sad what they didn't do for AIDS patients. However, with research now, the COVID is like, oh shit, someone in the government got COVID. Oh, we definitely have to get a vaccine for this. But the sad thing is, these producers of the vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, all those other ones, the vaccine nearly killed me. And I'm like, what kind of research did you guys do as far as like immunosuppressed people? Like, it seems like
that's the problem. Yeah. I mean, I think the acceleration, this is why Moderna had been working on mRNA for so long, because the fear was that, well, if we want this to be a blanket vaccine that, say, we're going to give to all 14-year-olds, or possibly these days 12-year-olds, to protect them against HIV, then it needs to work on everybody, and we need to spend a lot of time in medical trials repeatedly. But with COVID, we just sort of threw all that out the window. And so, yeah, I know several people with certain medical conditions who had a hard time with vaccines, or just couldn't take them, or they didn't take. So it's like, you've had this vaccine and nothing happened.
Right.
Whereas clearly something happened to me, because I'm like having COVID, not knowing I have it. So, and my parents were vaccinated too when they not boosted or whatever. But it's like, yeah, I mean, the problem with that's a problem with public health, and it only takes one. And I don't know if you remember, Kim, I'm not sure you would, thalidomide from the FDA made their reputation because they did not approve thalidomide, which in the UK caused a lot of birth defects in a certain cohort. And the FDA learned from everybody, including the FDA, who was successful in not approving it, learned from that they needed to be ultra cautious, because as soon as you get some deformed children, all hell breaks loose. And I remember what a scandal that was in the UK when it happened, because I have sort of vague memories of that, because I'm 30, some large number. And it's all back to risk, isn't it? Our favorite topic.
But then again, the FDA doesn't also approve a lot of things. So then they're like, our hands are clean. Whoops.
Of course.
And then you have to hope for compassionate use, which we don't really have an equivalent of with security.
Right.
So,
yeah, exactly. So as far as like the industry goes and cybersecurity, where we're headed, one thing that I've heard a lot of people talking about lately is industrial control systems, and how we're under such a threat right now for ICS. And one thing that bothers me, so we've watched the war in Ukraine, and we've watched Russia hit different networks. We've seen them use ransomware as a weapon, and everybody's freaking out about the vulnerabilities to the US infrastructure. And I had someone ask me about this week. That's why I bring it up. And I wanted to explain to them on air that our infrastructure, our critical infrastructure, especially the multiple grids we have across the US for power, were built pre-internet. Now, in order to take all of those systems and put them on a controlled network, on a safe internet connection, all that good stuff would require taking down that infrastructure, which is not going to happen. So the vulnerabilities are there, they exist, and it's ripe for the picking. And it's just a matter of time in my eyes. But they argued the fact that, oh, no, we secure all these plants, we secure all the connections. And I'm like, yeah, but still, you still have a lot of RF out there. Yeah, right.
So trusting, so naive. I'm sorry. It's like we should be doing whatever we can do.
Yes.
So, if that water control system is internet accessible without a VPN at all or anything else and no firewall, we should fix it. Or
Yeah.
maybe we should just take it offline, get in the car and drive down there when we need to do something. But to
Exactly.
believe that it's immune from any attack at all, especially if it's on a nation state, which
Mhm.
then can be combined with the kind of espionage you see in the Americans, only done less dramatically and with less beautiful people.
Right.
It's like, yeah, it's naive to think that those bells, whistles, and levers couldn't be remotely controlled in the
Yeah.
right circumstances. Because if you have unlimited funds, it's kind of easy to do that stuff. And if you've got an unlimited time frame,
Mhm.
yeah, it's one of the reasons I think it's a shame that we don't take rolling infrastructure improvement more seriously.
Right.
And that's going to come to our industry because if you look at how we've treated bridges, say, and
Mhm.
how many of them have structural issues and everything else,
Right.
apply that to like networks and routers and all this stuff. And even if you're patching them, they're, it's like things end of life, things erode. There are certain kinds of cables that are so easy to tap into, all of that stuff. And we haven't even scratched the surface of
Mhm.
the erosion of entropy, claiming everything as it will claim you,
Mhm.
which doesn't go down well when you say it in a board meeting.
Well, you look at like I think it's the History Channel that does it. They have a series I like watching. It's called When Nature Takes Over. So what it is it's different cities and different environments, and after people are gone, how quickly nature comes back and takes over the entire infrastructure. And to me,
Mhm.
that's fascinating. And
Oh yeah.
I've seen it some places around the world where places have been abandoned, and it literally looks like post-apocalyptic. I mean, it's
Oh
really
yeah.
cool.
They got it right in that cheesy version of Logan's Run.
Yeah.
Um, I always have a movie reference for everything, but it's like the sort of degradation. Degradation happens, and as anyone who's ever owned a house, it's like, oh, there better be some maintenance, and you've got to do certain things. Even if you pay someone else to do it, you still have to do it.
Right.
And but our infrastructure just sort of festers. And now that our infrastructure is digital as well, that too is going to fester. And the weakest points are, if you're in a land war, you're blowing up bridges,
Mhm.
or, trying to close them down or whatever, as you can see from things that have been happening in the recent excitement in the Ukraine, whatever you want to call it. And the same thing happens digitally. So if I'm trying to do something from a cyber attack point of view, I'm going to look for whatever is least maintained and the least upgradable, even if I assume everybody does the upgrades and the maintenance. And that's why IoT and ICS is on everybody's radar, because, oh my God, this thing can't be upgraded at all. Or to upgrade it, I've got to take it out of service. And, it doesn't know how to upgrade itself. I'm like, my coffee machine can upgrade itself if I put it onto Bluetooth with my
Mhm.
phone or put it onto a network. But yet something that's deciding how much chlorine to put in my water supply is unupgradable and probably on the internet, at least according to Shodan.
Yep.
Which is something that I think every politician and CEO of an infrastructure company should be forced to get a demo of Shodan.
They should have an account.
They wouldn't be able to use it. They need to be shown what happened. So you say to them, what kind of IoT device do you make? Let's go find 100,000 of them in various countries around the world, including this one. And somebody who knows what they're doing, because I always get the clauses the wrong way around. Tap, 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 off you go. And it's like, there they are. And it's like, what would you like to do now? Turn them all off? And it's like, oh. But I think that it's what Kim was saying before. People don't believe it till they see it, or till they have it, or till it's happened to them. Which is one of the reasons I think, instead of passing a law saying that all IoT devices should be upgradable, or whatever the hell it was that I saw fly by on the feed today, they should pass a law saying that every company that manufactures them and every organization that uses them should have to understand what it means if they don't secure them. Even all it takes is 5 or 10 minutes of someone's time, and you can show them, here's Shodan, here's how to find a bunch of internet connected things that you really wish weren't. I mean, I think some of the funniest stories are like, shall we say, internet connected sex toys.
I was just about to say that.
Which I was loath to talk about, but actually think that would be a good demo.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's
Please,
crazy how much stuff is
people
out
listening, don't do that.
there. No, don't. Please don't. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how much stuff is really out there. But it reminds me of my beginning days in cybersecurity, where I had just gotten into industry, and people, like the companies I would work for, would take me to their potential clients, not because I knew our platform inside and out, but for shock and awe. Like, oh, can you do this demo and break something? Just break anything. And I felt like a circus actor, a sideshow act.
Because you were.
Yeah, right. And so now we have it where people still don't understand, like they still don't see it. And I'm like, how are you so blind? Like, we've been doing this for 20 years. I've been breaking things for 20 years. How do you not know it can happen? So I was in Pennsylvania doing a talk for the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And I said this on my last podcast, is that it amazed me how many of those educators had no idea what these kids were capable of and what the rest of the world was capable of, as far as getting into their networks and stuff.
I think one of the things, and this talks to things that Kim and I have talked about before, one of the things I think is missing is we in the industry and we in cybersecurity love to get together and have parties and whatever like we used to. But we also love to give talks and demos to each other instead of to the general world. It's like, somebody would much rather be at DEF CON giving a speech, feeling like the big man on campus or whatever, than talking to a bunch of high school teachers about what they might need to worry about is happening with the kids that they're teaching, either from a point of view of some kid going out and doing things that they may wish later that they hadn't done, especially if they were over 18, or conversely, I mean, it was interesting to me with the whole cyberbullying thing, how many adults younger than me, but not children, didn't even realize what was happening, how it was happening, and that it was going on at all. So how are they supposed to spot the warning signs in their own children or in the children that are in their care if they have no idea that it's even possible?
Well, I have one better. I have one better for you. Look at LinkedIn and watch how much cyberbullying bullshit goes on LinkedIn, and nobody says anything about it. That's what surprises me. People in our own industry that watch someone getting attacked on LinkedIn visibly, and nobody steps up and says anything. That's what shocks me.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that you both kind of brought up was education. And one thing, going back to the industrial controls, like a lot of people that run those, they're not highly educated people. It's not that they're not amazingly talented. They're typically manual laborers, different things. They're awesome at doing a lot of different things that we're not doing, but the type of education that they have is not something that they're getting. And then we're also talking about children coming in that are they're like they have like no education at all, right? They're like kids, right? You know, they're teaching their teachers, right? And that's, maybe we should just have a better education system. I mean, I hate to say that, but why is it that somebody in a state like Mississippi or Alabama or Florida?
Because they're too busy teaching gender to kindergarten,
Right.
third graders than talking about things that could directly affect them, like cyberbullying and pedophiles on the internet. I don't know.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And it's sad. And I mean, it really comes back to that education. Yeah.
I mean, I could rant for quite some time about education and education systems. I think, you know, I have a longtime friend in the industry. I don't know if you guys know her, called Shah Sample, and he and I have talked extensively about the need for changes in education in cybersecurity. Just like how we educate people that are going to be in our industry, especially if, whether you believe there's a shortage or not, whether you believe it's, you know, well, the reason that this company thinks they have a shortage is because they're only hiring straight white guys, which may well be true, but it's like, you know, whether you believe that or not, there's still, again, because we're a young industry, a young field, we don't really yet understand how best to teach people, and also teach people outside our field. You know, it's like someone who runs the water system doesn't necessarily have to get CPEs to continue to run the water system. And I have a lot of issues with certifications, and
Me too.
For another day, maybe.
Right.
But there needs to, you know, the field moves quickly and technology moves quickly, and now everything is software. And so people that are traditionally in fields that did not need continuing education might actually be woefully out of date in 5 years.
Right.
So we need to reevaluate lifelong education, as well as how we educate our children or how we train people for cybersecurity. You know, but it's frustrating, but it's also more human nature. I mean, it's a lot more fun to get people whipped up about some partially created, almost non-existent thing that apparently no one is teaching our children, but we want to ban them from teaching it anyway, to teaching them things that are actually useful life skills, which also doesn't happen. Even, you know, you get a degree, you still can't write a resume to save your life. And it's like, was that helpful? Would a, you know, it's like I probably should have taken a year in a tech school as well to learn how to write resumes and, you know,
People
interact
can't
with
balance
people.
checkbooks anymore. People don't, or like, well, not that checkbooks really exist anymore, but
But the notional, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, they can't balance, like, so, I mean, people are graduating high school and going into college and perhaps can't even understand how money works. And then we're expecting them to understand.
They say they save that for the not so smart kids. And I'll tell you why I know this, because I didn't try in math. I never passed algebra in high school. So they thought, shit, this kid is going to not graduate because he has to have so many math classes. So what they do, they put me in the special class, which was consumer math. And it's to teach kids how to balance checkbooks. But the sad thing is, you had to not be able to pass algebra. Yeah, you had to not pass algebra in order to get into this class.
I mean, I have actually used algebra in my real life from time to time, but I've used checkbook balancing skills more.
Way more, yeah. Right.
Way more.
Exactly.
So I actually took a class on resume writing in high school, but here's why. So they changed the number of credits to graduate when I was a senior. So I actually had like 20 extra credits, but I couldn't take a half a day and just take my 3 core classes that I had to take. So I took just random classes with friends. Like I retook world history and everybody just, and I'm just like, well, why not? Like I took another art class and did all this stuff, but one of them was like a careers something, I don't know. But unfortunately, the biggest thing that I learned out of that was that my friend in the class was also a stalker for the teacher, and I had to go to the principal. So
that's where you learn how to stalk.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, he kept telling me these things. I made friends with him in the class, and then I'm like, oh, this has gone a little too far. Like, there's one thing about liking a teacher, and then he later got in trouble for trying to kidnap a lady. So I saved her life, but was not able to save everybody's life. But,
sounds like bad.
Nobody died, but
sounds like a really bad episode of Breaking Bad for some reason. I don't know what's going on.
I just feel like I had a really sheltered high school. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's like there was a point in there I wanted to latch onto, but now I'm stuck with the I didn't save anyone in high school.
What's funny? So you talk about the gap, the shortage of skilled workers in cybersecurity. Yeah. So I've come up with the actual solution, and it's not a skills gap. It's not a talent gap. What we're lacking is qualified HR departments. That's the problem. Totally the problem. I'm sorry, but 3 years experience is not entry level.
Actually, I'm going to not being from an HR person from my prior life. I won't blame the HR people, because they are getting told to do that.
I will. I'll tell you
what the C-suite that has nothing and knows nothing about what they're doing.
I'll tell you what should happen is that hiring managers should take the time to sit down with their HR people and in-house recruiters and explain to them what this job really is in terms that they can understand. No offense to HR people. Because, I see job descriptions that are like, well, you need 3 years experience, but it's entry level. Well, that's not. Or this job, I'm looking at it, it's like, that doesn't need 10 years experience. Or something where they say CISSP required, but they only require 2 years experience. And I'm like, well, you couldn't get it without 5 years experience, and people saying that they saw you do that. They had this whole people have to vouch for you thing. And it's like, this is one of the things with certifications, which I said I wasn't going to talk about, is just that people slap them on job descriptions, excluding large numbers of people, excluding certain people that can't afford to pay for the certifications. And you didn't even need one to do that job in the first place. If you needed it for that job, we could pay you to do it while you're doing the job. And give you something that works for you as well. But that doesn't happen either. It's like, I think we've created a part of this shortage for ourselves. I think we alienate a lot of people in this field.
We do.
Which comes back to the bullying. LinkedIn now has become, it's like, I've definitely seen jobs where they'll take a LinkedIn profile and no resume. So, it's like LinkedIn has become this thing, but now it's become this thing. So it's like we've got a different set of problems written differently. I mean, Glassdoor is kind of entertaining to go read sometimes, kind of like reading the comments on Wikipedia pages.
That's true. And looking at the average, salary for different positions is really interesting as far as what's legit and what's not. But I think that as far as the community goes and the industry goes, like, we've kind of gravitated towards like LinkedIn and Clubhouse, some of those other outlets for communication. But I spend most of my time focusing on getting knowledge and getting information out to people outside of cybersecurity. That's why I do those one-off, education conferences and some of these other conferences, is because everybody in our industry knows everything. You can't walk into a conference, give your talk, and not have at least one person conflict with what you said. However, if you go outside the industry, people are appreciative. They learn something. And normally the conversations that come up afterwards are fantastic. Of course, I've had a CISO in one of my conferences who told me that because he uses a cloud, his network at his school is completely secure. So I had to show him show him some examples, but educating people like that, I think is paramount.
So you would have gotten straight A's at that school, right, Mike?
Yeah.
What's that?
At that school, you would have gotten straight A's, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I stopped submitting things to conferences because they just all became sort of, it's like, well, unless I've got something really worth saying or really unique to say or new to say, and since I'm not I'm not a vulnerability researcher, so I'm not sitting there jumping at the bit for July so that I can tell everyone about how I found this horrible vulnerability in some sex toy. And, it's like, and it's like, really, I did do some speaking at conferences that were sort of a different tier. So like IT conferences rather than cybersecurity conferences. And that, you get an audience that is more appreciative, and also you're really educating people. I mean, I think I sort of got tired of it in some ways because I used to do a lot of it. And it's like, you go far enough back in Black Hat and you can find me. But it's like, and I once we start doing those things in person again, I may go to Black Hat again. Although this July, I think I'm not going to be able to, just to go run into random people that I haven't seen in years. Because when you've been in the industry for 30 years, there's a lot of people
I'm right there with you.
It's that actually is the primary motivation. In fact, in 2020, COVID spoiled my plan to spoil myself on Black Hat and DEF CON and just go without the intention of necessarily learning anything, and certainly not presenting, but rather just to reconnect with tons of people that, accidentally by wandering about, which is like the most fun of all. So
yeah, I really enjoyed that about DEF CON when I first started going. It's just seeing people and just walking around talking to people. Some of the talks were really good. Some are really bad. It just depends on who you're listening to or what the talk is about. But
same with the parties. Some of the parties were really good. Some of the parties were really bad. So.
Yeah. If we could go into the parties, but I think that would be a NSFW type conversation. So,
different kind of podcast.
Yeah.
right, for sure. Yeah, I kind of grew up in that scene, and I saw it evolve, and then I saw the numbers increase, and the halls being packed, and the fire department saying, "Hey, there's too many people here," and that's when you really knew that cybersecurity was taking main stage in basically pop culture, because it was hitting the movies, and you were seeing movies dedicated to nothing but hacking. And now we're seeing a huge influx of people coming into the industry who, that is the first thing that when I say, why are you coming to cybersecurity? That is the first job they always mention. I want to hack. Why do you want to hack? Because I saw it on a movie and it looks really cool, and you get to do some really neat stuff. And I'm like, that's like 1%.
Yeah. It's 1%, but it is the benefit of mainstreaming. If it attracts someone's attention who's potentially capable of doing a bunch of other things, they may delve into it, decide that whole hacking thing isn't really for them, but maybe come across something else. And that's, when I talk to people, when I talk to younger people, which I occasionally actually do, who are in the industry, it's like I go to meetups here and where I live, and it's like, well, why did you get into this? I mean, because of where I am, a lot of them came from military and just happened to get, assigned to it or whatever. But a lot of them, it's like, well, I started out thinking it was going to be all like stealth hacking, this thing and that thing. And then I discovered there were a bunch of other interesting things. Then I got distracted by this. And now I'm thinking maybe one day I want to be a CISO. And I'm like, so you better take some business classes then. And there's like a small percentage of them that already are, and the rest of them look at you like you're somehow some kind of green monster from the lagoon. And it's like, no, you're really actually going to have to deal with business if you want to do that.
Budgets,
and it's
everything.
All that stuff. It's so exciting.
Yeah, I was CISO for a day, I think, at one point, and I'm not sure how much of a CISO I was.
Is that like that old show Queen for a Day?
Yes. So I was actually like a CISO for a day, A lot of it I don't remember because I was in the hospital when I became the CISO. So I'm not really sure what happened. I woke up after the hospital stay and realized that they just used me to get into a Financial Times magazine to promote their business. So it was a great ride. Didn't get paid for it, but it was great.
You know,
Did you
I
get the
woke
pay for
up
the
one
day?
day. Yeah.
That's
that?
the question. Did you get the pay for the day?
I got no pay. I got zero pay.
I woke up one day and I swore that I dreamed I was a CISO, and then I read about it in the paper.
Yes, that's exactly what happened, actually.
That's kind of awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd like to get to that point again. I'm a manager right now of an MDR, which I really enjoy. I like working with the kids that are coming into the industry and the interns. Like it's really eye-opening when you start to create an environment that's conducive for people sharing information, as well as watching those people progress as other people share the information. So my biggest kick is watching an intern come in, putting them with other people that I've already promoted, and watching them as they learn and move into that next rank. And before I got there, it was like they weren't really communicating like they should, and people weren't helping out other people. And it became like, okay, I think I need to create an environment that's conducive for this type of friendship and relationship. And it just, it took off. And I love watching the stuff that they do. And, you know, when they catch something for the first time, you know, the only ones who caught it, like that brings me fulfillment.
The team dynamic is the one thing that I miss by being back in the consulting realm. It's like, because when you've got a team of people, and especially when you're management, your work is to get them to do their work better and to collaborate more effectively, both with each other and with people outside the team. And if more cybersecurity team leaders were doing that, we would have better integration of cybersecurity into larger enterprises. We'd have less siloing of skill sets, and you know, everybody gets to be hacker for a day or whatever it is, but it's like not everyone can be on the red team. You know, it's like, as you said, it's really just a small fraction. But it's like the team building and teamwork is, you know, something that I get to do with my clients a little bit, but mostly it's missing, and I miss that. I think that there's not enough of that. You know, I think a key part of being a CISO is the managing down and the team management, and encouraging everyone to do the best they can, and encouraging even the most junior person to put up their hand and say, we didn't think of this, because that's how security works. It's like the outside the box, the different thinking. And you know, I think it's a shame that that doesn't exist more than it does.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I focus on, and I really stress to the team and to other people that are managers or whatever of a SOC, is that, you know, don't teach them just blue team skills. Like I taught, you know, my team how to use DNS to hide data in with steganography. Show them why that alert is triggered and what triggered it and how it triggered it. You know, so I show them hacking demos and stuff like that, because I think that's important. You know, Sun Tzu, I go by the art of war. That is my Bible, is to defeat your enemy, you have to know your enemy. You have to become the enemy. And a lot of people in cybersecurity don't understand that. They think, okay, I'm either blue or I'm red, or I'm marketing, or I'm a vendor, or whatever. Why not everything?
Natural human tendency to bucket yourself or to be part of a tribe. And you said before, you know, everyone in cybersecurity knows everything. And it's not that we know everything. It's just that ideally you need to know it. Well, lots of people think they do, but you need to know a little bit about everything in the whole field. So it's like, I may not be an expert threat modeler, but I know someone who is, and I know someone who's excellent at it and trains people at it. So, you know, it's like, if I were in an organization and I wanted to do threat modeling, I would probably buy some copies of his book for my team. I'd probably have him come talk to them if I could afford it, you know. And it's like, I expect to have to know a little bit about everything.
Yeah, and that's one of
but
the first.
I don't expect to be an expert.
Exactly. I think to call yourself an expert in cybersecurity is very short-sighted and very egocentric, because technology moves so fast. So many things come out every day. And unless you're pumping out 10 0 days a day, I wish people would stop calling themselves subject matter experts.
I think, other people sometimes will call me that, and I let them, mea culpa. But it's like, I rarely say, I say it's something that I do. And it's like, if you ask me a question about something and I go do some research, I can probably talk knowledgeably about some new threat, possibly even monkeypox, and but some new threat within our sphere. And I can probably know where my boundaries are with that. And, if I have a team, my first instinct would be, well, this is something that might interest you. Take this, learn about it, come back and tell us all about it.
Right.
Because, I don't want to be the only guy doing that.
Yeah, I don't understand why cybersecurity doesn't look like a sports team. Like, it should be like a sports team. Like, you have
cheerleaders
in baseball, like baseball, like a soft, like the shortstop is what did you say? Sorry.
Cheerleaders and halftime and popcorn.
Yeah.
Well, they used to have booth babes, I heard.
There you go.
That was the cheerleaders.
I went to a trade show in DC years and years and years ago, and we were thoroughly impressed that one particular vendor had booth babes of both sexes and multiple colors, and we just stood there with our mouths open, like, wow, they've got booth bimbos that aren't blonde white girls. No offense to blonde white girls.
And then
there were two guys.
Then the company went out of business the next week.
No.
I don't know. I can't even remember what the company was. I was just too in awe of the bouncing booth bimbos who were doing some kind of dance routine.
Oh my God.
Nice.
But yeah, so going back to the sports thing. Oh, my dog is, hold on.
Yeah. So, booth babes and dogs and barking. Yeah. But yeah,
I was saying, like, sorry, I just wanted to say, like, with sports teams, like, like in baseball, you have like a shortstop, and like the third baseman will fill in for the third, like everybody covers everyone. And that's what cybersecurity really should be, right? Yes, like, everybody can kind of be a backup for each other.
And the bubble should extend beyond that. If you're in a company that develops software, then the software people should feel like the cybersecurity team have their back and will help them and train them and work with them. And not that, and that some of them actually might know something about coding or code reviewing or whatever, rather than, oh, these are the people that come and stab us in the back with an audit.
And that's the way it's been forever. It's the way it's been forever. Like the beginning of our industry, I'm sure you remember, if security is walking down the hall, I swear the Imperial Death March from Star Wars was playing in the background.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And people would scatter.
Yeah.
And it's still that same way.
I had a moment at a company that I worked at where I was sitting writing some code it was Python, so it was kind of like, baby code. But for those of us that grew up writing C, and I was writing some code to integrate a couple of systems together with another one of those REST APIs that I say we should have and actually secure. And some engineer came over to ask me a question and just stood there, and he's like, "You're writing code." And I'm like, "Yeah, and I read your code too. And I can actually do this." And suddenly that changed the whole dynamic. Yeah. So the software engineer was like, okay, so he's not approaching this in the same way that the people at my old company used to. And I'm like, no, because I want you are the people I have to rely on, and the DevOps people are the people I have to rely on to actually do this stuff right and do it on an ongoing basis without, I can't have a set of eyes behind every person.
Right.
And it's like, it's collaborative. It's not combative, but I think it's still very much true in the industry that it's combative, and that the death march, the death march does play, and the noises are
Darth Vader.
Yeah. And it's a shame because it's not how we can move forward, you know.
No. And that's partially our fault too, the guys who've been in the industry for so long and helped build the industries, because we had the keys of the kingdom and knowledge, and we felt like in order to maintain our position and our jobs, we cannot let any of that get away, because the second you do, you have competition. And now that the industry's grown, there's still a little bit of that going on. But I think the person who said it the best was Tanisha Martin from Black Girls Hack. And she said the industry was built from old, long-haired, long-beard white guys that coded in Unix. And it's true. Like, that's where we started from. We've come a long way since then, but we have such a long way to go. And I think the world as a whole, I think it's a problem we all have. Diversity is not something that's easily accepted. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying firsthand. And it's interesting because it's like there is a place for long-haired, bearded, Unix programmer guys still in the industry, but they need to be prepared, and the rest of us need to be prepared to make room for everybody, because we can't do it by ourselves. I think there was a lot, you nailed it. There was a lot of like, this is our secret society. We are the cybersecurity Freemasons, and we're not going to let in, no girls allowed. It's like that sort of like written poorly,
with crayons,
with crayons and nailed to a tree. And my first approach to that is to say, well, why not? Here are 3 girls that know more than you do. But that's, I have discovered over the years that the way I think about diversity is not really the same as a lot of other people. So I've gotten used to having to introduce people to it formally, gently, and now less gently. I don't know, when I had my consulting company, I had particular instances of organizations that were very sort of stuck in that mold. And so I would bring, let's say I would pick whoever was the least expected person of my team to be the leader of the meeting.
Yes.
And it's like, no, I'm not leading the meeting, she is.
Right.
And then she would just, I'm thinking of a particular person who should remain nameless, just in case she doesn't want to be named. And, it would completely change the dynamic. And by the end of your 3 hours of meeting with exuded competency and someone who ran meetings way better than I did, and also could shut me down when I was talking, which is difficult. It changed some, if it changed one perspective, it was worth it. And it's something you have to do every day.
100%. And diversity to me, I grew up in an environment that wasn't very diverse. But I tell you what, like the older I get, the more I've been in the industry and the longer I've been here, I really enjoy diversity. I've met so many really, really cool people.
Absolutely. Yeah,
really cool people.
Absolutely.
And very smart and very above the board when it comes to being able to display competence and really have that knowledge, that real gritty knowledge that a lot of us lack. But diversity is real, and it should happen in every organization throughout the industry. And if the company's not diverse, they need to be ran out of the industry, because that's the future and that's the world we live in. Like, you can't make this a silo.
It's not. Nothing is a silo, and technology is getting better, but there've always been barriers to entry with this myth that women don't do math, for example, or that certain other groups of people aren't, just aren't right. And it's like, well, how do you know? Because you haven't let any of them actually try.
Exactly.
And it's like, if you look at, certainly with the women in math thing, you just have to look at the Second World War to discover that.
What was her name?
You're completely right.
What was her name? Hopper.
Grace Hopper.
Grace Hopper. Yes.
Yeah. Among
phenomenal.
others. I mean, there are hundreds of
Mhm.
women that did all kinds of things during the Second World War, purely in the technological sphere, including Julia fucking Child, for God's
Yes,
sake.
CIA
Who-
asset.
Yeah, CIA asset that she was. And it's like, it doesn't take many counterexamples, but they're often just not visible.
Right, right. And with Grace Hopper, the only reason why I remember who she is by what she did and the fact that she had the same type of rating I did. I was a cryptologist.
I worked at Interleaf, a company you may have heard of in the before time, and we had a conference room called Grace Hopper. We moved buildings and we went through a whole conference room naming exercise, and the goal was to find conference room names that represented everybody. And so, there were a lot of suggestions made and a lot of discussions about things. But I mean, what it led to was us saying, "Are we meeting in the hopper?"
Nice.
Which was probably disrespectful, but at least, it's like her name was there and you got to see it every day. It was the largest conference room as well, which I thought was apropos.
That's nice. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Ian, it's been a blast having you on, and I definitely would like to do this again. I think we could go on for hours with different topics. And I'd like to cover the certification topic as well.
Yes.
Because
make a note.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that same passionate bucket that you are with the certification.
Like a panel though of like 6 of us on here for this certification thing, because it's a topic. It is like a firebed topic. So
it's a third rail, and I love touching the third rail.
Yes. So for those of you who have British television on, let's see, May 22nd at 1300, which is 1 p.m. for people who don't understand that time, the World Service will have a show about digital ad fraud, which I did a piece for them. They interviewed me on Zoom for the documentary. So if you get a chance and you have BBC and you have access to that, it's the World Service, and it's at 1 o'clock on the 22nd. Other than that, thank you, Ian, for being on the show and having a discussion with us. It's really a blast. Kim, thank you.
Thank you so much for tolerating me.
Oh, I loved it. Every bit of it.
And my ranting.
Oh, you haven't seen me yet. So I'll see you guys next time, and be safe and take care. Cheers.
Take care, everyone. Bye.